This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/macvoices. And by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/macvoices. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm particularly excited about today's discussion because this is a conversation I've wanted to have for a long time about the value of the Macintosh and the Mac OS versus some of the other platforms that we all bandy about at times. And I couldn't think of two better guys than the two gentlemen I have to discuss this with because I think you'll understand why once you see who it is. So working from left to right on my screen, first up, we have Mr. Adam Christianson. Adam, great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, this is great. I'm so glad to have you. So where are you hanging your hat these days, as if I didn't know?
Well, I'm still doing the MacCast. Been doing it for, 10 years now? A little over 10 years. So MacCast.com is where you'll find the podcast or MacCast on iTunes. I also do an iOS-related show. Since we're not going to be talking about this here, I don't think we're focusing on Mac today. If people want more iOS stuff, they can check out the iosshow.com, and I do that with Jeff Gamet and Michael Johnston. And then occasionally I'm a guest on the Mac Show on the British Tech Network at britishtechnetwork.com. And then I'm MacCast on Twitter and all the social media places. If you just search for MacCast, you'll find me.
Yeah, that's great. They keep you all busy.
Yes.
Yes. Good. Next up, we have Mr. Victor Cajiao, who hasn't been here for a while. In fact, he was kind of out of podcasting for a while. He's back in now in a big way, and it's great to have him back and here on the MacJury. Victor, great to see you.
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's great to be back in it. I took a hiatus for a couple of years. I'm a retired man now. I have some time on my hands, so it's on like King Kong as far as I'm concerned. I'm trying to get back out there. I have a new show called TerraTech, TerraTech at terratech.tech. I picked up one of those tech domains, pretty cool. And that show is just going to be about technology around the world. I plan to interview just people from every practice that uses technology, medical, astronomy. I don't care. I'm going to go out and look for some cool people and interview them on the show. So join me out there. And then on Twitter, I'm my weird name, at VICTORCAJIAO. Great.
Well, it's great to see you. And I love the idea of the new show because you're not limiting yourself to much of anything. You can go to, if it has a power button and a knob, you can talk about it.
That's exactly it. Even if it doesn't, I'm going to look for some people on culinary arts, cooking, and there's some science and some technology around that I want to explore. I'm fascinated by it, so why not just go out and find all kinds of neat people to talk to?
Oh, that's great. Well, it's great to have you back in this particular game and also here because I thought that you bring a very unique perspective to our topic. So, guys, I've wanted to cover this for a while, and it probably will be an ongoing thing once we kick it down the hill and let it roll. But I get a little bit upset at times when I see things, commentary, podcast, or just text on the web or anywhere, when people just talk about folks switching platforms back and forth like there's nothing to it, like there's no value to much of anything, that we can change computing platforms, could change computers like we change our socks. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a lot of reasons. So I'm curious, though, before I get into my personal views, I want to ask both of you where you see that. Am I wrong that you can bounce from a Mac to a Chromebook to a Windows tablet to a Surface, whatever that is, if that's a tablet or not? Is it really that easy? And where does that leave the Mac as a platform? Adam, let you get the first shot in.
I think, it's funny that you brought us on because I think Victor's going to have some good perspective on this. And I think, Victor, we need to bring back a term for Chuck. And I don't remember if Chuck will remember this, but that way, way, way back when, I think when you switched, Victor, from typical PC to typical Mac user, we came up with this term. And I think you might have coined, I don't remember who exactly coined it, but it was the term slider.
That was
Remember
you. That was you, buddy. That was all you.
There was somebody in my audience who came up with that term. Well, we had been talking about switching a lot, and I had one guy who sort of emailed me even back then. This is probably 8-9 years ago, and said, "You know what? I'm actually a slider. I live and work on Windows at the office, and I do Mac at home, and I switch back and forth between them." And I think that sort of concept is gotten wider as we've gotten more devices and more options and stuff like that. So I know we have a lot of people in our community that are using, say, an Android device as their smartphone, but a Mac as their main platform, or might be using an iPad as their main computing device, but they still have a Windows machine that they go back to occasionally. So I think even more and more these days, sliding is a thing. And so I guess it's going to come down to what the context is. I think people can. I personally don't. And I think, a lot of us don't, and a lot of people don't. I think there's pluses and minuses on both sides. But I do think we live in a much more robust ecosystem now from a technology standpoint. And things do play better together than they ever have in the past. I mean, way back when we were all running Mac OS 9, right? It wasn't even really an option. Apple would try with these weird Frankenstein machines. I think they had that one Mac that had a DOS card in it back in the early 90s or late 80s. And it never worked very well, and it was always a chore. And if you were on Windows at work, you typically wanted to be on Windows at home. And I don't think it's really that way anymore. But if we want to get more into the values of one versus the other, or saying that, there's no value in sticking with one platform, then, I think that's a separate conversation to have. And I would think that being all in one ecosystem, I think, has a lot of advantages. So to discount that, I think is not correct. But can you sort of live in this multi-platform, multi-tier world? I think so. And I mean, even exemplifying that, I say I'm a Mac OS 10 person, right? And I live most of my life inside the GUI, inside the user interface in OS 10. But honestly, I'm a web developer too. And so one of the reasons that the Mac platforms become stronger for me is because it has Unix under the hood. So could I go to Ubuntu in Linux on some other device and move back and forth and be very comfortable? Yes, I could. I don't. But, there's even that part of this conversation to have, right? Because when I'm opening up a terminal and messing around in the shell, am I really using OS 10, or am I using, I'm really using Unix, which is under there, but that is a completely different experience.
Wow. You took it in a direction I didn't anticipate. Completely didn't anticipate. And I like the term slider. I think you're right. I think we all do slide between devices. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's not a great one, but you can drive an automatic or you can drive a stick shift.
Sure.
A lot of different ways to go. But
they're very different experiences, right? And there's probably advantages to sticking with just one. Maybe you're going to become a lot better or a lot more proficient if you stick within that one sort of system. But can you work in both and be comfortable in both? Possibly. You're going to have more challenges, though, I think.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said here that the three people on here are geeks of one description or another. And I wonder, how this applies to the common man, if you will, that doesn't have the money to afford multiple machines. You're right, may be forced to use one platform at work and then has the option for another platform at home. But, Victor, I want to get you into here. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, much like Adam, I agree. I think that a lot of people are sliders. I was in the business world just until this last March. And day in, day out, I spent 8 to 11 hours a day, in the PC world in a Windows 7 environment or in Unix when I was doing the job. So I think that a lot more people, as Adam is stating, are probably more well-rounded than that. But where I always take this discussion is about what the user is looking for. And picking the right OS, like picking the right machine for your use case. What are you going to be using the machine for? You have to know yourself. You have to have that discussion with someone you trust, and then make the choice that's right for you. For me, today's choice is strictly the OS 10 system. That's what I love. I love the continuity between all of my devices. We can talk about a lot of other things. I think the variety is good. Introductions of OSs like Chrome have put another category of this, almost thin client web browser type centric device. And then we have a traditional PC. And like Adam pointed, we also have Ubuntu and those other OSs as well. So the variety is good. I am happy to talk about why it is that when I made the switch from PC to Mac, I've stuck with that, because there's just a plethora of reasons, and none of them have to do with being a fanboy. They have to do with how I use the machine to create, which to me is like a tool. If I buy a screwdriver, it's for a specific thing. I use the Mac OS because I'm doing a specific task that to me it does best.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
I just thought of a good analogy, actually, probably, Chuck, now that Victor mentioned tools, right? If we think about the computer as a tool, and the good analogy is, I can walk into a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that, and I can buy a power drill from Ryobi and maybe a circular saw from Black & Decker and, a Makita drill, right? But all of those are going to have different batteries. They'll all do the task that they're designed to do, but I'm going to have separate chargers and separate. It complicates my sort of ecosystem. If I go in and I buy all one brand that takes the same batteries that I can use with the same chargers, my workflow becomes much simpler and much more streamlined, I think. And that's probably a pretty good analogy. If you start to mix and match some of your technologies, you're going to have a few more challenges and hurdles to work through than if you're sticking with a single sort of platform or ecosystem.
That is a great analogy, and I would agree with it. I guess, and Victor, what you were saying, well, this applies, I guess, to both examples. I think of the Mac as a tool too, but it's kind of like politics right now. I don't want to vote based on one issue. I need to take a look at the whole thing, and I'm going. There are going to be some trade-offs, and something. If I were a gamer, for example, I think it's pretty generally acknowledged that the Mac is not the best gaming machine, but it's a phenomenal machine if you want to do some video editing or some photography work or whatever. So I'm going to look at the whole picture. I guess where I go with this, though, is that the stability, the security, and the ease of use. It's still, in my experience, Mac users tend to experiment more and tend to use their Macs for more things, as opposed to the average PC user who says, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do these 2 or 3 things and forget the utilities and forget all this other stuff. And that's kind of where I wonder about, the choice of platforms when someone says, well, you know what, the new MacBook is $1,200. But I can buy a Windows laptop, that's maybe not quite as cool or quite as sexy for $500. And it's like, I think you're missing the point.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as you talked about what we were going to do for this show, I went out and did a little research on one of the extremes that I think is going on that is a little bit scary. And that is, for example, the Google Chrome Pixel. That machine is a 13-inch basically almost exactly like a 13-inch MacBook Air. But now you're throwing a Rolls-Royce engine into a shell that when we look at what Chrome OS can and cannot do, it just doesn't fit. There's no way you're going to need the kind of power that particular machine is throwing at you, and then you match it up with an OS like Chrome, and to me, that's where it falls apart. I was doing a comparison on CPU. I was doing it on RAM and on flash memory. They were lining up pretty darn good machine to machine. But as soon as you put that Chrome OS in there, now you've got manufacturers saying, pay $1,000 for a machine that's going to do so much less than what you can get in the Apple ecosystem. Adam's been talking about this ever since I first listened to him. The total cost of ownership, if you look at a Mac, and what you get for your money out of the box, once you consider that, I'm sure Adam will expand on it, I think this is where the power comes in. Now you integrate that with the entire ecosystem that you can buy into if you decide to go with only Apple. And now to me, it's just that's the solution I choose because I want my life to be simpler and easier these days. I don't want it complex.
Yeah, that Chrome Pixel, I think, is a great example of where the technology, the hardware itself, has all the capabilities and things that you want, but your OS that you're having to run on that is going to be potentially limiting in terms of your options. I mean, you're basically taking a machine that could be doing a lot of video editing and those sorts of things, and taking some of those options away from yourself. Even though the hardware's fully capable, then you're limited by the OS and the applications that are available. Although I don't know that machine very much. I'm assuming it's the same, as the Chrome OS ecosystem is, where most of the stuff that you're interacting with is online, right? And I think you can pull down certain apps to run offline. Does it have? And can you even get a video editor, Victor, for the Chromebook?
I think the store does have some, but it's not going to be anywhere near even what iMovie is doing.
Right.
And again, when you look at the specs, you'd think, oh, okay, I could see this machine running Windows 10. That'd be great. But when you're trying to have that kind of a mashup where the manufacturer is now taking a computer that looks sexy on paper and specs, and then unfortunately, the Chrome OS is just not a mature OS yet.
Right.
I'm not saying it's not going to get there, but we're not there yet. And so that's an extreme edge case, but I think it's a good one to bring up here because it kind of shocked me, to be quite honest with you.
Now, I'll go on the flip side of that, though, and say, I know people that will opt to not get, say, a MacBook Air or a MacBook and go with a $300 Chrome system because they want a light, portable, small computer with a keyboard that can do some text editing, surfing the web, and email. And that's the only thing they care about doing. And, the flip side of that is it is hard to kind of sell them on getting, say, a $1,300 MacBook, right? When they're saying, I got $1,300 here and $300 here, and all I'm going to do are these simple little tasks, and that's all I care about. You can make a lot of arguments, but at the end of the day, that's a pretty hard sell. I mean, I've tried to sell people on that. Well, what happens when you want to go beyond that? And sometimes people can't see past that. It's like, you are going to be limited at some point with that $300 laptop. It is only going to do those few things that you're thinking now, but next time you go out and for Christmas, you get a nice DSLR and you want to do some really high-end some large photo editing with a 16, megapixel image, is that going to grow with you, or are you going to be throwing that out and investing in a new system? And chances are you're going to be throwing that out and investing in it. Now, their counter argument will be, well, I was only $300 into it, so I'm willing to sort of take that risk. And I think, for me, that's a little short-sighted. I don't know if I'd want to make that choice, but I can understand where the thought process is in people's minds when they make those decisions.
I think that's a great point, is that people are they're so focused on today. And this applies to even us geeks. If something comes out and it's not exactly the way we think it should be, or not the way it was advertised, you think, okay, this is bad, and you slap it around a bit, as opposed to saying, okay, this is version 1 and it should be, but it's not. But, how quickly is it going to be the way it should be? And
USB-C is a great example of that, I think, right? It took a huge beating when Apple announced it in the MacBook.
Yeah.
And still is to a certain degree.
And I think it is because the peripherals aren't quite there yet. The adapters aren't quite there. So many of the things that you think we would need aren't quite there yet.
Yeah, but we were around when they dropped the floppy and brought out the original iMac with USB ports, and there were no USB devices. You remember that? Sure. And look how well that still did, and it really pushed forward that interface, and suddenly everything was USB. And I think USB-C is one of those technologies. Like, this is getting to what you were saying, Chuck, though. It's like you make an immediate reaction to something that comes out, and don't look at the longer game. And Apple's often playing the longer game, which again goes back to what Victor was talking about, which I've mentioned for years, about the longevity of a Mac product, right? Apple knows this connector is going to be a connector of the future, and they're willing to take that step very early on and say, okay, we're going to get our products in the market. We're going to have them there and available. Yes, the peripherals aren't fully there yet, but we know they're coming, and our customers are now going to be ahead of the curve, and they're going to be able to grow as that ecosystem grows. And, I like that philosophy. I like, being able to make that hard decision and say, oh, look, this is the future. We're making products for the future and for you growing with our products. And this is what it is. And then it pushes the industry forward, because Apple has been very successful in recent years with their laptops. And so manufacturers are looking at that and going, man, we better jump on the ball and get these products out there. And we're starting to see that. I mean, this is ramping up much more quickly with the USB-C peripherals that I'm seeing hit the market versus, what happened back in the days of the iMac. It took quite a while, from what I remember, for USB devices, USB 1.0 devices to hit the market after the iMac hit, because Apple didn't have the clout, back then that they do in the desktop and laptop markets.
It is happening quickly. And I think one of the things that we have a responsibility, people who are watching this show, people like us, we're nerds, we're geeks. And I think just part of our responsibility is that when people ask us, we have to give, a fair-minded assessment of what they're asking for. That's what a good Apple citizen would do. We're not just going to say, go get an Apple and have a nice day. It's like, what's your use case? That $300 computer may be perfect for that person's needs. But I think we also need to bring to the table, that bigger vision of how are you going to grow into this? What are you going to do in a couple of years? And what does this machine bring right out of the box that you can do at a much higher level of proficiency, especially in photography, in movies, in music? As a musician, I would have killed for something like GarageBand back in the late 80s when I was starting and I was having to pay exorbitant amounts of money for software to do that. It's free, folks. The equivalent of the Office suite comes along for the package, folks. So you have to kind of explain all of those things. And I think that's where people then appreciate and will take your point of view a little more seriously, other than the whole fanboy craze, which I just, I don't consider myself one. And I think I'm a computer geek. I'm not just an Apple fanboy.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. If you're a MacVoices listener or viewer, it's a pretty safe bet that we share some characteristics. You like to learn, to keep up with what's new and interesting in the tech field and beyond. That you are tech savvy to one degree or another. That you want to be more productive and probably need to be more productive, either for yourself or for your vocation. We all have our secret weapons that keep us afloat and ahead of the competition. I'm happy to say that lynda.com is a key piece of my arsenal. No one can learn everything about everything, no matter how hard we try, because tomorrow, next week, or next month, there's even more of everything. If I can learn something from an expert, why would I want to waste precious time trying to figure it out for myself? lynda.com has experts in a wide variety of subjects, tech and non-tech, who will help you learn what you need to learn fast and efficiently, and at your own pace. Say that you need to get up to speed on Google Apps for the office, or want to learn how to work with Camera Raw in Photoshop Creative Cloud, or are interested in learning about entrepreneurship from someone like the one and only Guy Kawasaki. Those are just a few of the recent courses that lynda.com has published. And I mean just a few, because there are all sorts of videos to help you learn about the general concepts of a topic, or the down and dirty details. You can try all of this for a free full 10 days by signing up at lynda.com/MacVoices. During that 10 days, you can watch whatever you want, as much as you want, on any subject you want. No restrictions, no limitations. Try a design course, then a spreadsheet course, then a web publishing course. You pick the topics that suit you, not some limited subset of the collection of over 3,500 courses on lynda.com. Please, do something nice for yourself right now by signing up for 10 days free at lynda.com/MacVoices, then let me know what you decided to watch. Maybe we can trade recommendations. I'm on Twitter as @ChuckJoyner, and I want to hear from you. One last time, lynda.com/MacVoices for a free 10-day trial. Do it now, you won't regret it. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of MacVoices.
And there's the ecosystem that you're buying into as well, that you have to bring up that argument. So yes, you're getting that $300, Chrome laptop, but you're also then with that purchase decision saying, I'm going to buy into Google's cloud ecosystem, which has a lot of security, privacy, mostly privacy in my mind, concerns that come along with it, right? Are you willing to let Google store all your documents in the cloud because you're not going to have that storage? Are you willing to let them sync your stuff and buy into, the data sort of acquisition that they do? They're going to take your data and they're going to want to market to you because they make their money from ads and the marketing stuff. If you're okay with that, that's the trade-off. So yes, you're getting a cheaper system, but you're trading something for that. and being upfront with people about that as well. And yes, you don't have to, just because I'm sure we'll get the emails, you don't have to, buy into that. But then again, you're even more limiting that platform if you don't, sign up for those services. So
what's really interesting here is that a word hasn't come up yet. I think I was the only one that brought it up so far, and that is Microsoft and Windows. Google seems to be right now arguably the 300-pound gorilla in the room, but Microsoft is over there. It has Windows 10.
It's getting some great buzz.
Yeah, it seems to be, although it's interesting. The buzz I've heard is good, but there's not a lot of buzz about it, unless you go looking for it, at least in the paths that I travel. There's a lot more Chrome buzz and Google buzz. So to ramp on, because there's so many things you both brought up I want to touch on, but to ramp on the security thing, who would you rather put your data in the hands of? Google, Microsoft, Apple?
For me, it'd go Apple, Microsoft, Google. Google would be the last person. Although, and I say that fully having a Gmail account, and I have, stuff in Google Docs, and I do have a few things here and there, but most of my stuff is in Apple's iCloud platform at this point. Most of the stuff I'm syncing through my apps. I'm using iCloud Keychain. I'm fully invested in the Apple ecosystem in terms of iCloud, and I had no qualms about doing that. I don't feel uncomfortable about that. I don't feel concerned about Apple taking my data and using it for anything really. They really have stressed that they are not interested in our data because we're not the product. They sell us the products that they make. Versus, I know that Google's whole game is we are the product. Our data is the product. So,
but Victor, I'm with Adam. Google's been very upfront, but Microsoft is kind of quiet on the whole issue, and I'm not sure if that doesn't scare me more.
Yeah, well, Microsoft has had such a bad rep for so long around security, its ability to patch on time, all of the exploits, that I think that they're trying to lay low for a reason. I'm with Adam as far as order. I would also go Apple, Microsoft, and Google, especially Google's latest announcement about their router offering, and what is that going to bring to the table? It's getting darn right scary from that perspective. And I, too, have bought into the Google ecosystem in many ways. But if we talk about Apple and security, because this comes up so often in those discussions I have with people, I come at it and I tell them, it's a very robust system. You've got an incredibly complex firewall that is incredibly simple to use. What's behind the window of the Apple firewall is really quite something. But the way that they implement it makes it seem, and it is, just very simple to use. Above and beyond that, you have a discussion with people about full disk encryption, which of course comes with Yosemite as well. Being able to basically flip a switch, write down a password, and have your entire disk in a laptop encrypted to a level of security that the NSA might have a problem getting to, is really saying something, and so it takes a minute for people to grasp onto that. But when it comes to laptops, I really emphasize that, because there's just nothing worse than that feeling of getting a laptop ripped off, and then, where do you go from there? The other thing that's come into play, and I've had several Mac user friends come to me recently, is the area of malware. Yeah. The concept of hijacking your computer, of that telephone call that says, in order for us to fix your computer, we're going to need $200, and they're doing this through malware. They're not doing this, through a traditional virus type software. It's being done through malware, and it can be pretty easily fixed on a Mac. And there's some very good antivirus programs out there if you choose to use one, if you choose not to be careful where you go, not to do things like have the proper settings and security so you can't download software from anywhere but the App Store, which is, of course, what I suggest to people as their default setting. These are things that Apple thinks of in their ecosystem that, to me, makes it real easy to say, when it comes to security, you can be pretty certain that you're going to be in a good place, and you're not going to have to be worried about, what's the next time that I'm going to have 1,000 pop-up windows and malware be popping up all over the place. It just hasn't been my experience, if you're careful.
I'm so glad you brought up the router, and I don't want to take us off on too much of a tangent, but this new Google router was just getting all these accolades. First of all, when no one's had their hands on one. But what really cracked me up, and I only saw one pundit on one podcast bring it up, there were people that were pulling Nest thermostats off their walls when Google bought Nest because they were a little paranoid. And yet Google is now going to have a router in your house. It's going to watch all of your traffic and pass through. Doesn't that bother anyone? I mean, yes, there are a lot of cool things about that router, but really, and this is not a Google bashing show, but it's a question you have to ask in today's world.
Yeah. It's interesting. People should go take a look. I think, and I can't remember, I think it's up on Mac Observer right now, which is a site I work for, just full disclosure. But Jim Tanis, who writes for Tech Review, did a little piece on that hub, pointing out one of the things is everybody's giving it accolades for sort of doing, it has some like data packet shaping stuff, so it'll give priority inside your network, say, to streaming video packets, so you get better streaming video connections and quality. But what he points out is all the stuff that it sort of touts happens inside your network. They really can't control what's outside the network. So, it's like if your ISP is doing, data shaping and data blocking, they're not going to be able to compensate for that anyway. So a lot of the big accolades it's getting, yes, it's great stuff and it's going to help in some cases, but it's not as broad as I think some people are thinking it is. And then you do have hey, this is a product from Google. What's going on there? And I guess that comes down to, I haven't looked through or I haven't seen anybody write up anything on sort of the software licensing or terms of service with that device again, because I think nobody has them in their hands. So, I mean, is it just purely a piece of hardware and you don't have to give data over to Google, or is part of the agreement you're giving data over to Google by using that product? That I don't know. I would imagine it's in the same category as the Nest. I have a Nest thermostat and I didn't pull mine off the wall because Google has said, we're not interested in that data. We're not going to do that. They didn't really change the terms of service that I agreed to when I bought my Nest when it was its own company, at least as far as I know. If I'm being naive about that, somebody let me know. But that's my understanding from what I've read. So I'm not too worried about that. Getting back on the security thing on the Mac side, though, something I want to comment, because Victor brought up the whole malware thing. Something I've had to tell people recently who are looking at a Mac is, to be very clear that Macs are not immune. And also, I have dealt with many users that have been targeted by malware on the Mac. We had the whole Mac Keeper fiasco, and that's still ongoing, and people are still getting hit by that one on the Mac side. So there is ways for this stuff to get onto our systems. I think the key difference is how Apple reacts and responds to that. And the other thing I point out is that Apple has not had a perfect track record recently in that area either. There's been a few cases where I think they could have been more upfront and acted more quickly on some of the exploits that have been out there. Sometimes they do move a little bit slower than we'd like, but I think overall, if you look at Apple compared to the other platforms and ecosystems, I think they're generally ahead of the curve on that. So I still feel good about recommending that to people. But again, getting back to what Victor was saying about always trying to sort of make sure that we're being open and honest and sort of forthcoming with our information. I don't want to give Apple credit where they shouldn't get credit, because they do make missteps in the security area sometimes. But I mean, you've got technologies like Gatekeeper, which are amazing. I mean, those help keep users who are maybe less knowledgeable from making stupid decisions where this malware could get on their system, right? If something's not signed by a developer, you're not going to be able to install it unless you have gone in and implicitly turned off that feature. And when you try to turn off that feature, there's some severe warnings that say, hey, you're putting yourself at risk. Are you really sure you want to do this? And I think that's going to stop most users from doing that. And, many will argue, well, then you're limiting my choices and you're limiting but there's good benefits to that for, I think, a large number of consumers and users. And I think the benefits far outweigh any sort of inconveniences that might crop up for people. So I think Apple's done a great job balancing the security and the convenience. And I think, if we want to go back to Microsoft had a few years where they went totally the wrong way. I don't know if you remember, but everything used to be a pop-up warning. And it got so bad to the point where most people just ignored them because it's like, oh my God, what are you telling me about now? It's just like click, click. People started just doing the click thing. I think Apple's done a generally good job. I think occasionally it gets a little bit like that, but overall, I mean, that's another reason why I'm sticking with this platform.
Yeah, I believe that when we go above just security, and we talk about some of the things that I like to tell people about Macs that I enjoy, if we look at design just alone, not only the aesthetic design, which is beautiful and thin and all of that, but it's made to fit your life ergonomically as well. I mean, let's think about the iPhone and the popularity of the iPhone. This is the device, folks, that has one port and a headphone jack, and it's loved by a lot of people, and it's used by a lot of people. Why? Because it's easy to use. And now, when we look at design in Apple computers, we are talking about not just a consideration of how they look, but I tell people how they are designed inside, how the guts work within that ecosystem, how they specifically make chipsets that are made to work better, how they make chips that are made for security-driven purposes like thumbprint reader in the phones. So all of these things are taken into consideration for me when I think about design. It isn't just about aesthetics. It's about the total package in which you're bringing on board. And to me, that's important. The other thing is, imagine going out and buying a PC and having to deal with the number of SKUs from all the different companies. I think it would just be overwhelming to have to make that choice. That's one of the things that would scare me the most. Who do you go with all that hardware? They're using the same processors a lot of times and graphics cards, but how do you decide? Apple has stuck with still a minimal number of SKUs. That makes my life simpler. And to me, Apple and simple go together, and simple in the best word, in the best use of the word. Not simple in what you can do with it, but simple in how you use it. Intuitive, I think, is a word that Adam has used over and over again when he's described, if you're going to do something in the Apple system, think about how you would do it naturally. That's probably how you're going to do it.
Yeah, think about how you want to do it and just do that. And 90% of the time, it's gonna work. It's like, I want to put this thing over there. Well, grab it, drag it, and put it over there. I want to put a photo into Photos. Well, grab your photo and put it on the photo application and drop it. It'll go in. And it's amazing when I have new Mac users and they do that for the first time. They're like, "Really? Mm-hmm. You mean I have iPhoto open? I want to put the photo in iPhoto. How do I import it? Well, just grab the photo from your card and drop it in Photos. Really? That'll work." Yeah, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do, right? Yeah, I want to put that in there. We'll put that in there, and there you go.
Yeah. And the continuity of that from that user that you're talking about, the brand new user, to somebody who's using Final Cut Pro. Right. I can still take a file and just drag it in. It doesn't get harder because you've got more depth of product when it comes to software. I love that. Adam, I used to get new users all the time. How do you delete applications? That used to be a nightmare in Windows. I don't know how it is now, to be frank. But when I would tell people you drop it in the trash, they would go, "Say what?" They just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, what do you want to do? I want to throw it away. Well, throw it away.
Throw it away. So it's things like that people, I think, are limited because their experience has been that they've had to learn technology that they didn't want to have to learn. Right. And that prevents them from doing what they're really in front of their computer to do. More than likely write, create, do something creatively, or just consume information. Not everybody wants to be a computer geek and get deep into weeds, folks. And that's the reality of it. A lot of us do, but a lot of people just don't want it. Me, I want it less and less the older I get.
Before we move on, can I come back to Victor's design thing? Because I think he made a really great point. And one thing I want to add to that, because this comes down to, again, this argument when you're talking to people about the value of what they're getting when they're picking a platform or ecosystem. So when they're going into a Mac, a lot of times people will get bogged down in the spec for spec race, right? So, this one has this processor for this price, and this one has this processor and this much RAM and this much flash and this graphics card versus that graphics card, and they get really mired down in that minutia. The thing is what I need to always stress to people is, yes, the Mac on paper, the specs might be slightly lower than that other system that you're looking at that's at the same price point. But again, because the hardware and the software are designed from the ground up to all work together, Apple can often do a lot more with less. And I can often have to refer them to benchmark sites and say, okay, go and look at some real world benchmarks. Look at Photoshop. You know you're going to run Photoshop. Look at Photoshop running on that system and Photoshop running on. And Photoshop may not be the best example if it's not optimized, but I think you get the point. Is you've got to look at the real world numbers of what you're doing with it and see how the performance maps out. And a great example of this came up this week with iPhones. I think that they were looking at the latest Android Galaxy phones versus the iPhone 6. And on paper, the iPhone 6 specs are much, not significantly lower, but quite a bit lower. But when they actually ran tests on it, the iPhone outperformed the newer, faster processor, more RAM Android phone. And that's because Apple controls everything from the chipsets to the graphics. And we've got things like Metal now, and there's stuff in the software that the operating system is coded to be so optimized for the hardware that, again, Apple can do a lot more often with less. So I always tell people, don't get mired in, this one has a 2.4 quad core, and this one has this PC has a 2.8 for the same price. You might get more performance still out of the Mac.
The majority of the audience that's listening to this or watching this, there's no way you're going to max out the performance of any of these processors. Short of doing some Photoshop work or some Final Cut work, the odds are that you've got more than enough horsepower under the hood. You've got more than you will ever use. So I'm with you. That's kind of a non-issue.
Yeah, but a lot of people use that as their buying choice, right? They say, I can get this one for $800 and the processor's faster and it's got a little bit more RAM. But, it's like coming back and saying, really look at what are your again, coming back to this idea. What are your use cases, and go out and find some benchmarks to see, how quickly can it process video, how quickly can it encode the final product you're trying to get to, and make sure that it truly is faster, because sometimes the overhead of the operating system and just all the other stuff that's running on that system are going to slow it down. It's going to end up being slower, not faster, even though from a hardware standpoint. And very often, I think this is the case with a lot of Android devices, they have to put more hardware in there to compensate for some of the shortcomings of the operating system. They need more power to get it to go as fast as an iPhone that has less.
I think that this is the fault of hardware manufacturers, specifically computer manufacturers, who had to make their differentiator numbers. And it's not Microsoft's problem. It was all the other manufacturers out there making PCs that had to have a race to the top by numbers. And so, people will go out there and buy the computer by number. Oh, if it's a bigger number, it must be better. That was all. And the manufacturers are the ones that trained the market channels to take that position. And, a lot of people like us, we followed like sheep and said, big, better. And that just isn't the case today. And when we look at Apple products, as Adam said, it's the integration. If we move from hardware to the software side of the house, let me give you one example. The iPhotos application. The integration of an application like iPhotos on the Mac is so well integrated with the rest of the ecosystem, whether you're going to buy iCloud or not. If you are, it's perfectly integrated. But even if you're not, I can be an amateur photographer that just shoots family pictures and use iPhoto and be very, very happy and understand it. Or I can be a photographer who shoots raw files and wants to get pretty deep in the weeds, and I can do an awful lot just in iPhoto. Now, there are always the edge cases. Apple is building to the 99 percentile of the users out there. They're not going to go for the 1% that have to have all of the tools, all of the plugins in whatever area, whether it's photography, music, the same thing. And then the additional thing that I've seen Apple do in a quiet way, just yesterday, it was a great Logic Pro upgrade. They added a synthesizer called Alchemy into their Logic Pro X line. Now, this is a company that they bought, and if you were to go out and buy that piece of software by itself, it was like, I think, around $300. Apple just simply included it, 14 gigabytes, huge, 3,000 presets. This is a deep synthesizer. And Apple just throws it in and says, here you go. This is part of your original investment, no additional cost. And for a musician who is out there gigging for $100 a wedding, they can't afford to be paying $200 every 6 months for upgrades. So once again, where do you want to pay me? Do you want to pay me up front? Do you want to pay me in the middle? Or do you want to just keep buying hardware over and over? Right. That's the kind of decisions that I think users have to make out there. And Mac makes that a little easier for guys like me.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices and use the code MacVoices when you place your order. When you order a Casper mattress, you get an obsessively engineered product at a shockingly good price. We're not talking 5 or 10 or even 20% savings over what you find in the mattress warehouses or department stores. We're talking a whole lot more than that, because when you're talking about Casper, you're talking about a premium mattress, not one of the cheap ones. You're talking about the perfect pairing of latex foam and memory foam to give you a better night's sleep for brighter days. You're talking about a mattress made in America that can be had for $500 for a twin-size mattress, up to $950 for a king. Compare that to any mattress that you've been looking at, and you'll realize just what kind of percentage savings we're talking about. There are other advantages to a Casper mattress too. First, you don't have to visit the mattress showroom, lay down for 5 minutes and try to figure out the difference between mattresses, or whether you like it or don't like it, and what fits you. Your Casper mattress comes with a 100-day free trial in your home. If you don't like it, and I can't imagine that, then you'll have a painless return process where they send someone for your mattress. You don't even have to repack it. And speaking of packing, your Casper arrives at your doorstep in a compact box, just waiting to spring to life. Is your bedroom upstairs? I'm convinced that today's architects don't build houses to get mattresses upstairs easily. If you take your Casper upstairs before unpacking it, it's no more difficult than a big load of laundry. Then, open your new mattress, watch it spring to life, and be ready to go in about 5 minutes from the start of unboxing to finish. So what you've got is a premium mattress that is the best you've ever had, a great price, convenient delivery, easy to maneuver to your bedroom, and even easier to set up, and a free 100-day trial period. What more could you want? Oh, a discount? I've got that covered too. If you go to casper.com/MacVoices right now, you can get $50 off your choice of any Casper mattress with the discount code MacVoices. You need to go to that URL and use that code. So again, it's casper.com/MacVoices and the discount code MacVoices to get $50 off the best mattress you've ever owned. When you've received your Casper, I'd love to hear from you and how you like it, because I don't know anyone who's tried a Casper and been unhappy. In fact, they're usually better people because they get a better night's sleep. That could be you. Casper.com for the best night's sleep you've ever had and the discount code MacVoices to save $50. Do it today, sleep better by the end of the week. Thanks to Casper for their support of MacVoices. But one thing that always fascinates me about the pundits and the journalists and everyone who are out there who are saying, well, you can buy this for this much and this for that much. First of all, the learning curve, but second of all, the investment in software that people have. And really this applies to any platform except perhaps the Chromebook and Chrome OS. If you're any kind of a computer user, you have an investment in software. I don't even want to think about what's on my production machine as far as software. And that means I would have to dump all of that and go rebuy it, reinstall it, and in some cases relearn how to use it because the interfaces aren't always the same between the two. And then you have the issue of favorite utilities, where I'm so used to setting up my particular workspace with certain utilities that make what I do faster. And I feel like this is never discussed about it, or even attempted nobody's made an attempt at quantifying this. You know, that if you switch from Windows to Mac, you're going to have to rebuy a lot of stuff. Yeah. Right now, that doesn't seem to be a problem because according to all the stats we see, there are people that are still moving over. But if you're going to jump back and forth, man, I can't imagine that should be a major consideration, and it's not written up anywhere.
Well, yeah. I mean, as much as you know, there's some big downsides to this. This is part of the reason I think why companies like Microsoft and Adobe are going with cloud-based subscription software, because they can address this issue of, I mean, when you get Creative Cloud, you get Mac or PC, and you can move back and forth. And I think it's the same thing on the Windows side of things. You just sort of get licensing for that software, and it doesn't really matter what platform you need it for. You're paying the subscription and you get it. So I think there might be more of that in the future to sort of address this thing, because consumers have sort of said this is what they want to do. Obviously, that's not going to work for a lot of smaller companies, though, Chuck. So I think, your point is well made. I have certain utilities that I rely on my Mac, and I'm going to have a hard time finding those on another platform. We've seen it with, iOS and Android devices as well. There's a lot of things that are available on iOS that people come to rely on that may or may not be available on Android, or vice versa. And if you're going to go with a Surface or a Windows, kind of ecosystem, it's even more difficult. I'm in an iOS developers group, and the Windows guys show up very often, just practically begging developers to bring their stuff over to that platform because they're really struggling. I think it's getting better for them, but you do have those issues if you're going to be bouncing between platforms. Are you going to have all the tools and things that you need? But again, I think, not to keep it coming back to, but I think sort of the theme of the show is going to be, when you're making these decisions, when you're trying to decide what platforms am I going to use, what technologies am I going to use, you really have to start with your use cases. And you're going to have to do your research and say, okay, if I do want to be that person that's going to run an Android device, for my tablet, and I'm going to run a Mac for my desktop, and you're going to do this sort of cross ecosystem thing, you're going to have to look and make sure all those tools are already available. And I do think it's much easier when you're sticking with one platform to ensure that, because developers tend to like a platform and sort of stick to it, with a few edge cases.
And the cloud services have nothing to do with cash flow at all.
Yeah. And to me, I mean, Chuck, I know we're running short on time. The last thing that I want to say around this is, what I often tell people is, okay, so let's say that you're not sure if you want to go to the Mac OS or not, and you've been a Windows user for a long time, but you're ready to buy a machine. So go out and buy a Mac, because you know what? If you hate it, you buy it and you absolutely hate the OS, then Mac gives you the ability to run Windows on Boot Camp. Great piece of hardware to run Windows on, if you ask me, other than gamers, I agree. But other than that, use Boot Camp and have Windows, and you'll have a great Apple computer with all of that hardware doing Windows. Or, hey, even better, God forbid you want to run both systems, for $80, you can have your choice of Parallels or VMware Fusion and have at it with a machine that's more than going to be able to handle that. So it's that kind of flexibility that's offered on the Mac side that, you can't find that in any Windows-based computer today other than an Apple hardware.
Or even, I mean, your worst case scenario, Victor, that's a great piece of advice, and I haven't thought about telling people that, but I probably will in the future. I'm just even thinking worst case scenario is you turn around and you sell that Mac. And I mean, they hold their resale value so well, you're maybe out a couple $100, but live and learn and you move on. Yeah.
That's exactly right, Adam. That's what I did with the watch. I tried it. It wasn't for me. I sold it a month later. I rented it for $100, and I got, it was a great deal. And it had nothing to do with the quality of the watch. It wasn't for me. The use case, not the device. So you're right. I mean, they hold their value, and I have a 4-year-old MacBook Air that today runs about as good as it did the first day I got it, because I use it very minimally.
That's the other thing I was going to say about longevity. I'm running a 2011 MacBook Pro, and I don't have any intent of probably upgrading it or replacing it anytime soon. I'm probably going to run it until it breaks. And a lot of my Macs are that way. I have a Mac Mini that is an original Core Duo. I think it's a 2006 model. That is a file server. It's hooked up to a Drobo, and I use it for LAN backup on my network. And that thing it's headless, and it runs, and it's continued to run and do its thing forever and ever. And I, have often challenged people, show me your PC from 2006 that's doing anything in your house or running or doing, anything.
These are all great points, and they're the kind of points that people do tend to overlook when you're buying a nice, bright, shiny new machine. That right. What am I going to do with it in 5 years? Well, you can hand it down to the kids. You can sell it off. There's so many things, because it's still going to be useful. And I'm sure there are going to be people that say, well, I've got a PC from year 2000 that I still run this and that on. Yeah, you probably
Far
do.
less common. Far less common than what I see with Macs.
Yeah, far less common, far less likely too for the average man or woman. So
I was going to even ask you. I mean, that 2006 Mini is the oldest machine I think I have in my house right now that is running. Up until this last year, my wife had a 2009 iMac, and we just upgraded her to a 2014 Mini. Just because her computing needs aren't that heavy. I'm curious with you guys. I mean, do you have old systems still running, and what are the age of those systems that you're actively using? Or are you guys more, I upgrade and kind of move on? Because different people are different.
Yeah, I've got a couple laptops around that are still in use for one thing or another. I think the oldest iMac, or the oldest computer that's in active service is that iMac back there, and honestly, I've forgotten what year it is. But it's got some age on it, no question, and it still runs. When I compare it to the other one sitting beside it, it's running slow. But if I use it for things that were intended at the time it was released, it's a great machine.
It's just I know so many people who will buy that that $500 PC laptop, and they get they'll get about 2 years, maybe 3 years use out of it before it really needs to be replaced. I mean, it starts to show its age. And again, I have a 2011, so a 4-year-old at this point MacBook Pro, and it's not showing any signs of slowing down. And I'm going to be able to run Apple's next generation operating system on it with no problem. It'll actually maybe even run better running El Capitan. And it's like, find a 4, 5, 6-year-old PC. I don't know what the specs on Windows 10 are, but I'm going to guess they would have a hard time running Windows 10 on a machine of that age.
Yeah, I agree. I was on a 2-year cycle. When I was a PC user, every 2 years I would buy a PC or a desktop. That was it, because that's as long as they would last. On the Apple side now that I'm not podcasting all the time, 4-year. That's the new cycle now, 4-year, and I'm very comfortable. And right now, the 2011 MacBook Air, it's probably going to go 5 years this time.
Yeah. So, the point is like net, if you were spending $500 every 2 years on a PC, or you're spending $1,200 every 4 years on a Mac, yeah, maybe you're $200 more into the Mac. But I think for all the other reasons we talked about on the show, specifically all of the software that comes along free for the ride and all of the utility you're going to get out of it, I think when you look at it that way, you can see how much value, more value there is in the Mac. Even though it's a upfront investment a little bit more, long term, you're getting a lot more, I think.
Whoever made that point, I think, is an amazing point that we all tend to overlook. But you've got numbers, you've got pages, you've got Keynote, you've got photos, you've got GarageBand,
iMovie.
Messaging. You can just go on and on. And again, the way that they integrate to each other, that share button on each of those applications lets you move things between applications so seamlessly. That would have been just a headache, before. And as an Apple user, I appreciate that. Never mind as just a computer user. It makes my life easier moving stuff around. Add to that some of the cloud services that are now being provided by Apple. And now you've got the whole enchilada when it comes to an ecosystem that's talking to each other all the time, and that your stuff is always with you no matter where you're at. That's what Apple wants, and that's what they're delivering. But slowly but surely.
So the one thing we haven't even touched on related to this too is the App Store. So we talk about all the built-in applications, but also comes with the App Store in there. And again, if you invest in the ecosystem, if you buy all your software through the App Store, when you get to that 4-year point, when you upgrade, right, there's that whole process too, right? So you get your new Mac, you plug it in, and it says, hey, do you have your time? Oh, we didn't even mention Time Machine backup, which is amazing built-in backup. Yep. Makes it super simple for people to do what they're supposed to do. So you use that, you get your new machine, it says, oh, do you have a Time Machine backup? Yes, I do. Pulls in all your accounts, all your software, it sets up the machine for you, boom, you're ready to go. And if you bought your software through the Mac App Store and you need to reinstall it, guess what? You want us to put all your applications back on here? Oh, yes, please. Click.
It's those little things.
It's magical.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been, I can't believe the time has gone by so fast. Thank you both so much for some insights, some things that even I'd forgotten or overlooked, and some brand new things. And I hope it didn't come off as us just advocating for the Mac platform, although I think there is some of that. but it's such a good choice for so many people. Not for everyone. And yes, you have to do the cost-benefit analysis and take a look at your own pocketbook and decide what you can afford. But there's more than just the price tag. And for heaven's sake, please don't go to Best Buy and just ask the salesman what he thinks, because there are a lot of secondary agendas there going on. We're not going to get into those, but that's not the place to go. So, I mean, go to the store. It's a great store, but just don't rely on the advice. So, Adam, one more time, where can folks find you on Twitter?
MacCast. So just MacCast.
Great. And it's maccast.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And Victor, the new show is TerraTech?
TerraTech.tech. That's right.
Yeah, love the new domain. I like that.
Yeah, it is cool. I was happy to get it. And you can find me on Twitter at Victor Cajiao. Chuck will have links, I'm sure, directly to that. Please follow me. I'd love to meet you.
Great. Thanks, guys, for being here. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. As Victor said, check the show notes for links to everything. We've talked about where to find both of them when they're not here serving on the MacJury, and a little bit of everything else. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.